I grew up in the Bronx in New York City. My family landed there because my parents, they partied a little too hard in the 70s. You know, they were getting high like there was no tomorrow, and it was cocaine and heroin, and, you know, they'd both come from tragic circumstances. They had my sister, and then they had me. And I don't know if you've ever done this in your own life, but it's really something to sit down and think about what was the context that I was born into. I came to realize that I grew up in the aftermath of what happened when the party was over. And that's to say that our parents had transformed from, casual users to full-blown addicts. Their addiction to drugs shaped our lives together. My parents, get high with needles in front of my sister and I every day. It's a kind of ugly drug addiction where someone is, they would sell the television for $5 to get high. They would sell my sister's winter coat. Just to be clear with you, it was a desperate kind of everyday, all-day addiction. And I grew up with the belief, unfortunately, like so many people struggling in our society, that survival was, in fact, the highest thing to strive for. And that was very compelling because we practiced it every day when we would knock on our neighbors' doors for food. When they would open the door and feed us, it was a good day. And when they didn't, and we ate ice cubes and toothpaste, and we waited for the next check to come, it was a much harder day. And I know I'm painting my parents as the bad guy, but actually I experienced myself as deeply loved by them. I felt they loved me and I loved them very much. I thought my family would stay together. We didn't have money, we didn't have much. We had each other and we had it all. And I didn't know they were sharing their drug needles with strangers. My mother became HIV positive first. My father's diagnosis came years later. And if you fast forward this whole thing, and I should have been picking out my prom dress and studying for my SATs, but instead my family had become homeless. My father was in a homeless shelter. My mother was in the hospital, and she was dying. I'm not proud to admit this, but after much caretaking and connection with my mother, I visited her less and less, and when she passed away, we buried her the day after Christmas. I had just turned 16, and I'd already been homeless on the streets of New York City for about a year. And when I went and sat on my friend's couch in the Bronx in New York City, my friends that day were business as usual. They were sitting around complaining. I'd gotten a bit caught up in that blame mentality. Whose fault was it that I was in this circumstance? How bad was this? But as I sat on that couch and I listened to my friends go around and complain, having just buried my mom, and with that fresh on my mind, a shift happened. And I remember thinking, well, you know what? I'm lucky to have these friends. They love me and I love them. And the next thought that came, my mom's not here, but I'll always have that love. And, my dad's not around, but he loves me, and I'm healthy. High school's free. I may be way behind, but high school's free. You know what? I'm all right. And the thoughts came cascading down. And really what the difference was this. I came to realize that there comes a moment in our lives where we would be so much better off to stop counting the things we don't have and just be grateful for the things that we do. It's truly the difference between resentment and gratitude. Gratitude is nothing more than realizing that every single thing you have, you could just as easily not have it. And I went knocking on doors all throughout high schools in New York City, and I walked into one place after another, and I went from one rejection to the next, when finally I almost gave up. And I remember standing there, because look, someone can only try so many times. Because people look at you, and if you think that the playing field in this country is completely even, and someone doesn't have, or they're not doing well, then what reason do you make of that? Character deficit, right? There's something wrong with you. And I went from one place to the next, and I remember thinking, I'm gonna go one more time. And that's when I walked into the office of a teacher who would later become my mentor. His name is Perry. I'm ashamed of how I treated Perry the day I met him. And as he began to tease out of me what had happened to me, which was his primary concern at first, and then we quickly shifted to what my goals were. I remember I told him everything I told you. I did not tell him I was homeless. And he looks at me, and I'm ready for the pity he's going to give me, because that's how people look at you when you come from where I come from. But instead, he looks at me and he said, well, we're going to talk about your family for years here. Of course you're accepted. But under a condition, I'm your mentor. I'll hold you accountable for everything you say. You said straight A's. Shake my hand on it. And for the days and weeks and months that I was there were many times where I wanted to give up. I slept on the subway. I slept in Central Park. I was able to wrap up all 4 years of school into 2 while keeping my secret that I was homeless. With my mentor, I was encouraged to apply to Harvard after a field trip there. I filled out scholarships, and I sent my story to the New York Times. I got that scholarship from the Times. They wrote my life story in the paper. They made a movie about it. I wrote a book about it. Everything changed. I'll leave you with a phrase Perry said to me, and then I'm off. When I took him out to lunch, I got a chance to thank him. And I got to ask him why he helped me. And he said, well, I had a mentor, so I mentored you. A long time ago, someone stood up for someone who stood up for someone else, and so tag, you're it. No one's off the hook. And when you don't help young people, you don't help people rise up in our society, the tragedy is not what they lost. The tragedy is that we lost all they have to contribute, to hold ourselves accountable as we hold them accountable, to shift the systems so that more people might rise up and have a chance. Thank you.